So welcome to the second lecture in the 3H project. This is the one I particularly have been waiting to do with interest. It's lecture 2, Up with the Rebels, the Presbyterian United Irishmen at Hayes Tavern. And I'm going to show you where Hayes Tavern actually existed, or where it was. And first of all, I know we're all tour guides, we're all professionals. So what I want to do is just go in and just cover a wee bit of the historiography of this. So just recap. So we'll have this guy here, who's the Marchioness of Donegal, who gave John Brown Square. John Brown was the master of the lodge, and he was a Belfast volunteer. But the big sea change came whenever the Belfast volunteers became the militia, because they went from local control and pay to national control and pay, and therefore very much like British Army. So the local control that had been existing was gone. We know that Anne Brown, for example, was already selling off grants of land at Brown Square in the name of the Marquis of Donegal. And John Brown himself had taken up to 10 pieces of land from the Donegal family as those long leases. So this is the townland of Brown Square is down here. So this particular map's 1832. So you can see how quickly Brown Square went from 4 trees up to this time. Okay, the red line coming down, you can see this is the Farset River. So John, and you can also see the other rackets of Blackstaff here. So John Brown very cleverly looked at where would be the best place for the buy land. You know, would it be in the green fields of Malone? No, he chose here. So this townland here that became now is known as the Shankill Road, and also over onto the Cliftonville. And he chose it because he knew that this new technology, these mills that were being built, because in 1832, you can begin to see the mills starting up here. So Joy's mill is here, for example. So he cleverly bought the land where the water ran through. So he always had a source of water, and he knew that it'd be valuable land. So much so that this is exactly the same map, and this one is 1900. So now you can see how ways shrewd John Brown was, because this was the lands that eventually he was to sell off, or his daughter was to sell off. And here you can see Brickfield Mills. You can see now all the mills were built along the course of the Farset. So he was a clever person, far thinker as well. And as John Gray so rightly said yesterday, he built and sold this particular mansion, and this is at Solitude, which is where Cliftonville football ground is today. And I think, and John may correct me, but I think the actual house itself was built near enough where the upper dam was. I know that, for example, in Brown Square, his house was described as a palatial mansion. And this is his second house, because I think John Brown started this and his son finished it. But you can see the scale of the house. It's got 2 stories. It's got an annex. So we're talking a rich person here. Modern day, Brown Square, I took this tonight when I was walking my dog. There he is there, just there in the bottom of the corner. So the real estate today is still just as valuable. And Brown Square today, so for one of these apartments here, it's between 120 and 180,000. And the houses that are being built here will be worth upwards of $250,000. And they're sold. So these are already been sold. So this is where I'm hoping my technology is going to work. So where exactly is Brown Square? So fingers crossed. So I'm going to zoom out. We're going to go all the way out. So I'm going to show you exactly where Brown Square is. And so this is Brown Square. So this is looking roughly, if you remember the map from last week, that's in the background, the bird's eye view that was drawn back in the 1650s. So I'm just going to swap this into 2D first. Okay, so here's the West Link. And then we're going to do, hopefully, a zoom around Brown Square. So now you'll be...
I'm not getting this. There's no video feed here. Sorry to interrupt you, Frank.
Hang on. Is everybody else getting it?
No, unfortunately not, Frank.
No.
Hang on. Stop share. Try it again. What about that?
Yeah.
That's working now, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Sorry, a little technical difficulty there, but we got it. Thanks for that, by the way. Please do stop me if I can't see what you're seeing. So we're now looking at the modern Brown Square. We're zooming around, and the points of interest, the West Link, you can see this is North Street. That's the old North Street. This is Royal Avenue. Here you have the City Hall, and that's the Linen Hall Library there. Belfast Metropolitan College, and the old Black Man, the old Belfast Inst, which is there. So you can see in relation, Brown Square is very much part of the central part of Belfast. You know, you'd imagine it's not, but it really would be just off the periphery of Belfast. But you can see how John Brown himself, he either picked this bit of ground or he was given it, but you can see how valuable it still is. This is the lagging going down. So where is John Brown today? So, and this is where I'm hoping it's going to work. So we're going to go to John Brown's grave, and this is, we're going to visit John Brown's grave, by the way, as part of the tours. And should be going out. Everybody see that okay? Yes?
Yeah.
We're now in Knockbreda Cemetery. So I don't know if anybody has been there. It's going to zoom out here. So up here you have Forestside Shopping Centre. Okay. This is one of those hidden gems in Belfast. So I'm just going to do this again. And so you have Knockbreda Parish Church. And John Brown, when he died, was one of the richest men in Belfast. So he was buried in what I would call Millionaires Row. And as I said, we're going to go and actually visit this. So stop it there and I'll just zoom in. So John, some of the tombs you see here. So you have John McCracken, the brother of Henry Joy. You have the burial place of the family of Samuel Nielsen, one of the famous United Irishmen. You have Sir Charles Lanyon is buried here. This guy here we're going to speak about in a moment is Waddell Cunningham, and the Gregg family are here too. And so Captain John Brown, as I say, you have him here, and this should work. So there we go. So there we have Henry Joy's brother, Robert. And some of the material tonight is thanks to this particular guy here. This is at the grave at Knockbreda. This guy is Stephen McCracken. So some of the sources I used came from Stephen's fantastic work, and Stephen's an up-and-coming historian. We also have, so if we go in, you can see John Brown has his own wall. It's actually a wall. And if you look over here, we also have somebody else who will come up in next week's lecture, Robert Shipboy McAdam. Now, I don't know if you've heard of him, but you will have certainly passed this place. So this is Culterland on the Falls Road, used to be a Presbyterian church. And it's named after Robert Shipboy McAdam. And this was his foundry in Townsend Street. So part of Brown Square. The original gateway was here, or that is the original gate. This is the gates of Townsend Street Presbyterian Church. which you'll be visiting as part of the tours. And you also have a bottling factory here. And this is an Orange Lodge that was formed up. And this would roughly be where the Peace Line is today. So I'm glad that worked. So back to Brown Square again. We'll go to John Brown's house. So just looking here, there isn't much to look at today, but I am going to walk you around. But if you do remark, it's exactly the same layout as it was. So the same shape, the same angles are all here. It's still intact as it was whenever John Brown got his hands on it back in 1780. So back to the lecture again. I maybe have to stop share for the moment. Okay. So do we all know where Brown Square is? I hope that filled in all the blanks. Okay. So everybody see the lecture now? Yes. Okay. So what about Brown Square? How come it became such an important place? Well, it wasn't just about United Irish Rebellion. It was also about the other movements in the countryside that also was brought into Belfast. So in June 1770, this is original text, when I came to Belfast, I learned the real cause of the late insurrection in this neighbourhood. Lord Donegal, the proprietor of almost all the whole country, came hither to give his tenants new leases. But when they came, they found 2 merchants of the town had taken their farms over their heads, so that multitudes of them, with their wives and children, were turned out to the wide world. It's no wonder that, as their lives were now bitter to them, they should fly out as they did. It is rather a wonder that they did not go much further, and if they had, who would have been most at fault? Those without home, without money, without food for themselves, our families, or those who drove them to this extremity. So Lord Donegal, this is where the countryside and then the country and Belfast, the political context became. So down below you have a source, Francis Joseph Bigger, who was at Brown Square, and he sourced this particular letter. So it was sent to one of these new tenants who had gotten the land from farmers and then doubled, trebled, sometimes multiplied their rents. And that became the Hearts of Steel movement. We look at it as a movement now, as a group of a body, but it wasn't really a group as such. It was just a collection of people who had had enough and were driven to violence. So down beneath, Madam, I'm sorry about the language in this, it's still the old text. I command to set your land to the old tenants, which in it at a reasonable rent. To be sure, we Hearts of Steel knows that you're a lonely woman and does not care for hurting you, for we will allow you a proper rent for it, which is 6 pence an acre, or 11 shillings 44 pence for each lease. And we allow your tenants to be obliging to you must take care and answer our request of setting your land. If you do not, you may expect bad treatment from us soon. To be sure, take our advice at the first, and we will be your friends and humble servants. So it was a threat, but it was also a chance to not move to violence, but to try and get justice. Okay. So what happened? The king himself actually replied, and he sent a letter to the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. So the king does not doubt, but that your excellency will endeavour by any means in your power to contrive persons of property their situation in this respect, and instill into them the principles of equity and moderation, which is to be feared and can only apply an efficient remedy to this evil. So this is George III, 1772, just before the American Revolution. So for most of the people in the countryside, they could either fight or they could leave. Some left. And I love this book here. It's how the Irish won the American Revolution. But there's in the days of of the 1780s and 1790s. There was no newspapers or internet. And so popular ballads was a way to retell these things. So this particular one is the story of those farmers from Ulster who emigrated to the States. So they settled on Hudson's banks and prospered day by day. They gladly joined the patriot ranks, for stalwart lads were they. And when the cry against England rose, they grasped their swords in glee and bravely smote their brutal foes and saw Columbia free. And so how did that plan out in Belfast? Well, for this, we'll have to thank the wonderful John Gray, who's our evaluator on the course. And this would have been used whether John was on the course or the evaluation or not. So the Son Collapse of Belfast. So 25 cotton spinning jennies were in operation in the town Belfast. By 1791, this had risen to 229, and linen manufacture had been wholly displaced. Between 1782 and 1781, the population of the town grew by nearly 40%, from 13,105 to 18,320. And in that comes a reduction in wages, because you also had the new industrialized factories with spinning jennies and mechanical means to do what used to be the work of single weavers in a single family. So on June the 9th of June, the Northern Star warned its readers that a very bold and daring spirit of combination has broken out amongst the cotton weavers of the town, has been communicated to bricklayers, carpenters, etc. So combination is their word for our trade unions. People coming together to combine with the hope that they can negotiate with these employers from a position of strength. How did it pan out in Brown Square? Well, one of the patrols of the Belfast Volunteer Company was around 10 p.m. attacked in Brown Square and the neighbourhood with volleys of stones, brickbats, etc. from the houses and bylanes. Several members were hurt, but none seriously. Now, I've taken this quote from John's book, and I would suggest, it's one of the things that would be a must read. Also, you can also check out reclaimtheenlightenment.net, which we're both members of, John as a president. So in Brown Square, it wasn't loyalty. People had begun to rebel against what was the industrialization and the driving down of wages. And you'd also associated minor famines as well. So one of the worst offenders and one of the best offenders, and the guy who gets, at the minute, bearing in mind the Black Lives Matter movement, we know this man here was indeed a slave owner, and he owned plantations in Jamaica. And he also was one of the ones who went out of his way to maintain the law. And he's wearing the uniform in this portrait of the militia. So the 23rd of December, away we did go to visit Belfast, for it must be so, to seek for our brother, if that he was there, and straight to release him, though pains we should spare. We went to the barracks, and there we did stand, and of Banks and Cunningham, so Stuart Banks was the sovereign of Belfast, we did demand the prisoner in durance. We knew not for what cause, but as they pretended, he had broken their laws. Then Banks, he made an answer, and this he did say, we'll not lose our prisoner any such way, for tomorrow morning before break of day, we'll hire a boat and take him away, house him away. Now the gate was thrown open, and there was displayed the soldiers in arms as they stood on parade. But with treachery base, they poured forth their shot, and 3 of our brave heroes lay dead on the spot. So Cunningham was the man who arrested the leader, a guy called Douglas of the Hearts of Steel. These guys marched into Belfast, and they marched into the barracks. Now, although Cunningham is a figure at the moment who's much in discussion, it's also worth noting that he helped found Belfast Royal Academy, BRA. So this spirit of volunteering also combined now, we know that he was a slave owner, a plantation owner. So we're looking back through the tunnel of time again, and you will visit his grave, and you can make your own mind up between Waddell Cunningham's grave and that of the family of Samuel Nielsen when it comes to where money is made and spent in Belfast. So matters came to a head with a farmer named Douglas, who was the reputed leader of resistance in Templepatrick. On Friday, 21st of December 1770, Douglas was arrested in Belfast by Waddell Cunningham and lodged in the military barracks, and that's at Barrack Street. The charge against him was hoeing cattle belonging to Thomas Gregg of Belfast, who, with Waddell Cunningham, was a particular object of dislike on account of the lands they had taken over their tenants' heads. They set fire to Waddell Cunningham's house, and that would be roughly where Tesco's is in Royal Avenue, and fired shots into Thomas Gregg's. This destruction and the fear lest the entire town should be burned as the whole place was in uproar had desired effect. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the barrack gates were thrown open and Douglas was restored to his friends, who marched back in triumph between Cave Hill and the sea to Templepatrick. This is a nice representation. There's a guy called John Curry. You'll see a lot of his work being portrayed as actual like photographs, but yeah, it's a representation, but it would be a fair enough representation because Curry would have had access to documentation on what the barracks looked like on Barrack Street. So this is Barrack Street today. So we're looking at Belfast Met on the left, and this is Barrack Street on the right. Now, that particular building then became Christian Brothers, and my best friend actually attended school there, and he would say it was still a barracks when he was there. But it was an interesting story came out when I did the research on this. This is Brown Square to your left, by the way, although, you know, this is Belfast Metropolitan College. This area here would have been and still is within the remit of Brown Square. So just here, Charles Glass, a soldier in the 51st Regiment of Foot, now quartered in the barracks of Belfast, was most inhumanely and barbarously maimed by the back sinews of his leg being cut through on Thursday last, the 15th of May, 1772, at 3 o'clock as he lay asleep in a field near the barracks, with his face downward, by two men, one of whom stated they treated him thus because one of the soldiers had given evidence against some of the hearts of steel. Charles Glass was a bit of a fool at the time for mixing himself up with informers and then sleeping in the open in Belfast with his face downward in a field near the barracks, leaving his hams exposed. He must have been a stranger. He also must have been very drunk. But this happened here, and strangely enough, I traced the regiment, the 57th Regiment of Foot. It was amalgamated as all British Army regiments do, and they changed their name, but they became the Queen's Regiment. And this is the Queen's Regiment, and this is Barrack Street, just here, and this is August 1969. So I thought this is a really nice link here, that, you know, 200 years later, the Queen's Regiment, the 57th Regiment of Foot, are back again in Belfast. And this is Millfield. So this would be where the tech is. So I'll just go back one. So this is looking from there upwards. Okay. So from the other direction, anybody who knows Belfast will know this is Divis Towers, and you can quickly orientate yourself with that. So there was a history of violence down here. So much so, although I'm going to jump forward a bit in time and then go back to the United Irishmen, that the last hangings, public hangings in Belfast, occurred because of an attack on this guy's his house, Francis Johnson, a large manufacturer. So the actual weaving was done in the workers' own homes at Millfield and Brown Square. The weavers had organised a boycott between themselves and had taken an oath neither to weave a web for him or portion of a web, nor permit others to work for him. Strike, in other words. But you can see they didn't kill anyone. They threw the first bomb that I know of. So the first bomb that was thrown in Belfast was thrown in this guy Francis Johnson's house, which was on Peters Hill. No one was killed, although two of his children were injured. But you can see the amount of money that was put up for the award, which was £2,000. That's a fantastic sum, you know. In today's money, it's almost £1 million today's money. And eventually 5 were caught for it. They were informed on, One was the informer, so he got off scot-free. 2 were sentenced to there was another 2 as well. 2 were sentenced to 18 months imprisonment, which in those days was no fun thing. 2 were flogged, but 2 were hung. This guy here, John McGill, and incredibly John Doe, were hung at Castle Junction. So roughly where Primark is, on September the 18th, 1816. Now, I'm just going to check here to see if there's anybody else waiting to get in. I'm not seeing it. No, it's not 17 yet. Okay. Sorry about that. So, 1798 and all that. So what's a tourist view? So the next big thing to happen in and around Brown Square, with all this going on with the weavers and the mill owners, was United Irish movement had begun to form, and it was formed in the early 1790s. And what I'm going to do is do the historiography. So if you're a tourist and you're coming to Belfast and you Google, you're interested in the United Irishmen, especially Americans, by the way, then you're going to Google it. You're going to come across this. So this one here is Visit Belfast. So one of Belfast's oldest traditional Irish pubs, Kelly's Cellars, offers live traditional music, pints of Guinness and Irish stew. And down here, Kelly's is also known for its history. The United Irishmen used Kelly's Cellars as a meeting place and plotted the 1798 rebellion against English rule. This one comes off the Ulster History Circle page. And it's very careful. Check this. It's very careful. This the load of text. The photograph is Kelly Cellars and the plaque is there. It doesn't actually say that they held any meetings in there. So this really intrigued me. And Stephen McCracken was another person because he took an interest because he is an ancestor of Henry Joy. So then you have Culture Ireland. So Kelly Cellars on Bank Street. So as Kelly Cellars dates back to 1720, there are many colourful tales relating to the tavern's past. Indeed, the United Irishman Henry Joy McCracken is said to have evaded capture by hiding beneath the bar. Now, at this stage again, if you're a tourist, then you're sold. But I'll go further. This is the Belfast Telegraph. So Kelly Cellars, the United Irishmen met to plot the 1788 uprising. Okay. So this is the Belfast Telegraph. So I discovered to try and find out where all these things are coming from. And what I found out was that it's Wikipedia. So these are the references. And this is all I can find on any references to the United Irishmen at Kelly Cellars. Now, what I did do was contacted the Ulster Historical Foundation. I phoned them, emailed them, and no one can answer me where this comes from. Okay, so I'm willing to learn, but at the minute I can find absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the United Irishmen are anywhere near what would have been a cellar. Okay, a place to store vats and wines and things like that, and certainly no evidence of Henry Joy McCracken heading out there or being searched for by militia. And I traced all these sources to this person here. So I have no idea who it is. All we know him as is Ardfern, and he lives in Salford. So who actually were these rebels then, and where did they socialise and plan to meet in the 1788 and the forgotten 1803 rebellion? So in the social void created by initial setup of Belfast by the Chichester family at the time of enlightenment, citizens in Belfast began to organise through creating charities and volunteering to partly police, protect, create critical social services such as water supply and sanitation, and comfort the deserving poor. So there was no real money around, although Donegal could donate lands, which is how he did it. So the Belfast Charitable Association was set up in 1752, and then Clifton House was built in 1774. There was also Belfast volunteer companies that were set up, and as I say, were officered by locals and paid for by locals as well. Freemasons, which is something we're going to come to in more detail, was another way of society organising itself, and clubs and societies and the entries and streets and bars of Belfast. So this is actually where the United Irishmen met, and this is where they first come up with the idea of Ireland separating from England. And this was Peggy Barclay's Franklin Arms and Sugar House entry, which is just off High Street. Now, unfortunately, it's gone. And the reason it's gone is because the Luftwaffe flattened High Street in 1941. My best guess for Sugar House entry, if you can see a doorway here, just on the left, my guess is this was the entry. And it sort of tallies up this with what is now the small entry to the left of River House, if you're familiar with Belfast. So this would have been where Peggy Barclay's Tavern would have stood right up until Hitler came along. And you can still orientate this, by the way, just up here is the Albert Clock. So for Angelica, who knows joined us, this would be Iceland now, and then the post office. So this was the heart of the rebellion. So in 1787, only about 3 months after the French failure and the new mistress of the body in full meeting, and the seizure of important papers took place at the house, the pub of John Alexander on Peters Hill in Belfast. The written documents revealed the entire system of baronial, provincial and national committees, the nature of the constitutions and the test which sealed the admission of its members, which was punishable by death. With these papers, the force consisted in Belfast alone of 2,639 men, 526 guns, 389 bayonets, 88 pistols, 567 pikes, 12,130 ball cartridges, 15,953 balls, 6 cannons and 1 mortar. And incidentally, it'll not be the last time that Brown Square would have been used as an arsenal. In the county Antrim, above 23,000 men were enrolled in conspiracy with a proportionate amount of arms and ammunition. Many of this year and in the next fell into possession of the government. Some of the cannons officially declared to belong to volunteers were now said to be in rebellious hands. Seizures of arms became frequent. Homemade pike makers were captured near Belfast. The weapons, some being sometimes hung around the owners or stuck in their hats, which picturesque guys, they were marched as prisoners into the town. That comes from George Bain, the Town Book of Belfast. Pikes were made at Brown Square. They were made at a forge, roughly where the left-hand building of Belfast Met stands today. So where was Alexander's Tavern? So my best guess, and my best guess is because there's no accurate records of here, of actually the buildings on here being named, because the first directory we have is from the Belfast Street Directory of about 1824, and sadly by then this was these taverns were gone, probably because they would have been wrecked by the Monaghan militia. So on the right you would have what became Israel Milliken's public baths, or it's not public, his private baths, where Lord Donegal took baths and took the air. And here on the left is where I believe Alexander's Tavern stood. So the headquarters of the meeting place of the United Irishmen, because we know the documents, so you would never have kept those documents anywhere else, bar someone with a real importance. And as George Ben describes it, the most important in Belfast stood here. So it's right on Peters Hill. And the next time you're driving up, if you're taking a tour bus up, now you can point it out. It's now known as it's Jeb's now, but I will walk you around so you can see these places. So we also know, and it should go back one here. So I'm going to jump forward a couple here. Just bear with me. So we also have a copy of Lodge Register 763, okay, which I'm going to come to in a moment. And this is a Masonic lodge and an Orange lodge. And in here you'll see the name Henry Joy McCracken. Yep, there we go. Henry Joy McCracken. And sorry, there he is there. Henry Joy McCracken. And above him, somewhere up there's Peter Higgins. So that one I'm still chasing down. So they met in a place called Hayes Tavern. And it stood here. This is Brown Street. And like this photograph, and to be honest with you, like I'm 60 years of age now, and almost everything you see here was still standing back in 1978, including these old cottages here and old buildings. And this is the building I believe was either Hayes Tavern or was built on top of Hayes Tavern, because it matches with the Belfast Street Directory records. And it was Stephen McCracken traced down the lodge meeting. And it's believed that this is where the informer McCracken began to talk Robert Sims out of taking on the leadership of the Army of the North, as it was known. Now, I put this photograph up, and I'm going to come back to this photograph at the end of the lecture, because what you're looking at here is the famous orange banner that used to span Brown Square. And if you look carefully, you'll see the Masonic symbol here. Okay, one of those strange things. And when you think about it, this is where Henry Joy McCracken met as a Presbyterian rebel to plan the United Irish Rebellion to drive the English out of Ireland. And this is about 150 years later, where it became, I believe, the most loyal place in Ireland, Brown Square. So how that came about, I'm going to come to that as part of the lectures. So how did United Irishmen organise? Well, this is the lodge members for 257 Masonic Orange Lodge. So the lodge itself met once a fortnight at the Donegal Arms at Castle Place, and its master was John Brown of Brown Square. And if you read down the list of the members, this is just some of the members: the Earl of Antrim, the Earl of Hillsborough, Lord Kilwarlen, the Reverend George McCartney, Arthur Chichester McCartney. They are the who's who of Belfast, and including over here, Lord O'Neill of Antrim. And Lord O'Neill was to die at the Battle of Antrim, pegged in the main street. But what I've done is that the list that I have of the list for 1793 is this. So what you have are if you read down the list, you have Thomas Sinclair Sr., United Irishman, Thomas Sinclair Jr. and his brothers, William Tennant, one of the founders of United Irishmen, Richard McCallum, one of the founders, James McCracken, an informer but a United Irishman, William McCracken, Henry Joy's brother, William McCleary, United Irishman and a major shareholder in the Northern Star newspaper, which was a United Irish newspaper, not necessarily a Hearts of Steel newspaper. I think it's safe to put it that way. Robert Hunter, Henry Hazlitt, another United Irishman and shareholder of the Star. Robert Wilson, a United Irishman who had the famous 50 guineas, he couldn't get a guinea sign, a 50 guineas reward on his head. So the government would have seen him to be one of their targets. William McGee, again, United Irishman, one of the shareholders of the Star. You have an MP, and this guy here is John Hughes, who again was a United Irish, but it was an informer. So this is 257 Masonic Lodge, and here you have the Freemasons calendar for 1786, and you can see it was a gift to the from the Right Honourable Lord Viscount Kilwarlen, this guy, to John Brown Esquire. That's surprisingly, it says Master of the Orange, Master of the Orange Lodge. As I say, people get them mixed up with the Orange Lodges. This is a Masonic Orange Lodge. March 8, 1786. So why did they use the Masonic as this vehicle? Well, I have to declare my hand here. I'm a former Mason of a 3rd degree, which is a Master Mason. So, and there are secrets. There are oaths that you must take, which I respect. So I'm not revealing any secrets here because I got this on the internet. But the oath of secrecy is like an oath not to reveal the secrets on pain of having your tongue cut out whilst blindfolded with a dagger at your chest while swearing the oath of secrecy. There's also a bit about your heart being torn out. Now, how valid was this? Well, we're looking back from our age to their age, and in their age, an oath like this was a sacred oath. And yes, the mason, this guy, would have been brought into the lodge room. His chest would have been bared because that's where the dagger was going to go. And he also had to show his leg, because if he were a prisoner or had been a prisoner, he would have shackle marks on his ankles. So this is where this came about. Is it true? Well, this particular guy here on there, I only put this in just for talk's sake, as I say. He became the head of the Vatican Lodge P2. And if you think back, there was an inquiry into money laundering, and the Alberto Reef, I think his name was found hung underneath Westminster Bridge. He was known as God's banker. And he was found in a manner that would be very similar to the breaking the oath of the Masonic Lodge. So why did John Brown use it? Well, here's the hierarchy of the Masonic Lodge. On the left, you have the Scottish rite. There's two different types. And here you have the York rite, which would be following the Irish rite as well. And the headquarters of the Masonic Lodge in Ireland is in Oldsworth Street in Dublin. So as a Master Mason in the 3rd degree, I've been down here. So these are new people coming in. They have to learn the oaths, and eventually you make your way up to the top up here. And this is a long way to travel. I know whenever I took my 3rd degree, it was in Molesworth Street. And I remember getting in, and there was the chair of King Edward VII, who was the head of the Masonic Order. So how did this work in Brown Square? So in March 1784, Captain Ranash and his son, Ranash, 2 Turks, taken prisoners by the Spaniards and attempting to bring relief to the garrison of Gibraltar, and who had afterwards escaped and got to Leith, from whence they came to this town, Belfast, well recommended by the Grand Lodge of Scotland, visited the Orange Lodge 257, where they were treated with every respect, civility, and loved by the members of that numerous and respectable body, who gave them a recommendation to other lodges and a sum of money to enable them to return to Constantinople, the place of their nationality. How grateful to the liberal mind to perceive the distinction of Turk and Christian. In short, all local and religious prejudices sunk in the sublime affection which, at the offspring of one common parent, we all owe to one another, and which every sound principle of religion and virtue never fails to heighten in the pure philanthropy, when not obscured by the rankest bigotry and evidence. They also dined and provided for the French officers who were captured at the French invasion of Carrickfergus and held at Barrack Street, the militia barracks. I do emphasise it was officers, not the men. So that was the social aspect and how Freemasonry worked, and why John Brown was the master of the lodge. And here we'll have the 2 lodges that really affect Brown Square. We'll have 762 St Stephen's Lodge. So my own belief, and I have to justify this, but this is where all the evidence is taking me, is the lodge meetings were more than likely held at Alexander's Tavern on Peters Hill. And so you had Samuel Kennedy, who was the printer of the Northern Star, Adam Dickey, the chair of the Standing Committee United Irishmen, Robert Hunter, who was the commander, and Arthur Kennedy, one of the committee of the United Irishmen. And again, as I've just said, and we know that Henry Joy McCracken was in the Brown Square Lodge. So firm evidence. Very much thanks to the source here, Faithful to the Lost, John Craig Little. And I would highly recommend this book if you're interested in learning the background of the Masonic and United Irishmen. Somebody asked me about Israel Milligan last week. Israel was United Irishman. He seems to be one of the longest serving. He certainly was one of the longest serving prisoners at Kilmainham. We don't know why just yet, because virtually everybody arrested with him were released months, sometimes years earlier, and they were far more serious than him. By 1805, he seemed to have come across a big fortune. We think he was exiled to the United States, but there's no evidence he actually went. But he too was a Mason. And you can see the lead. So he also worked with Freemasons, Sampson Clark, who was Israel's main first employer. So I know somebody was asking about Israel in relation to the gold rush, because when I was growing up at Brown Square, sorry, that source is the Axios of 98. So this is the famous Shankill gold rush. So what happened was a boy. So this is my school photograph. That's me. This guy here called Brian Drumgool was throwing stones, and this is the old houses being knocked down as part of the Belfast urban plan. And he threw a stone up into a fireplace, and a box fell out. The box hit the ground and was full of sovereigns. So everybody, every kid from Shankill descended on this bit of ground. I'm in there somewhere. I was there. I didn't get a sovereign, but I do remember one very unscrupulous neighbour of mine who was given anyone who found a sovereign 2 shillings for each sovereign. So for a kid, 2 shillings then was like heaven, but a sovereign then was worth about £144. So she made a killing that day. Sorry, I'm transgressing, but I know somebody asked about Israel and just wanted to cover that. So what happened to these informers? Well, Yule was one of them. And informing on the United Irishmen, if you were a leader, it meant death. It simply meant death. So so 2 stories are told relative to the end of Newell. He did literally inform on all the United Irishmen. The British authorities, government, knew in advance almost everything that United Irishmen were going to do before they even did it. Such was the effect. And this guy, Newell, was responsible for the hanging of at least 10, maybe 15 people. And not a very pleasant hanging either. There's a word, what happened to him? Well, there's still controversy over this. So there's a couple of stories are told at the end of him, the informer. Once he was found out, 2 men were told off, Reverend James Porter of Grey Abbey and Steele Dixon. So they took him out for a walk on the sands of the Loch of White House, and that was the last seen or heard of him. Now, that doesn't sound right of 2 ministers, but the walk out on the sands of the Loch of White House sounds about right. But you can see here, this source, as I wrote out by Cathal Byrne, is that in 1788, when Newell was about to emigrate to America, he was shot near the Hold Stone at the back of Cave Hill. And he's buried somewhere up near Rockford, which is a lovely tie-in to James Hope, because this man was born in Rockford and lived and died at Brown Square. So James Hope, United Irishman of Brown Square, was born in Templepatrick. It's actually Rockford. He was, as we said, a linen weaver to trade, educated to a degree much above that of the average working man of his time. Now, he self-educated himself, so he read as he wove. Early in his life, he turned to politics from social motives and was one of the most trusted of the United Irishmen, Northern United Irishmen. He fought at the Battle of Ballynahinch in 98. At Antrim, he was the leader of the Protestant Spartans. And also in 1803, he endeavoured with Thomas Russell to effect another rising in County Down. How important was Jimmy Hope? Well, this is an 18th century painting that hangs in Clifton House. And this is the United Irish leadership across Ireland. And over here you have Henry Joy McCracken. Here you have Thomas Russell. This guy's Napper Tandy. And here you have Jimmy Hope. So if you look at his clothes in comparison to the contemporaries of his time, you'll see he simply was a weaver, but a brave one at that. So what do we know about him? And this is a story. So one evening in his house at Brown Square, the trader McCracken, a pet informer who lived at Fountain Lane, he came to Jimmy Hope that he had a matter of great importance to communicate him, and for that purpose invited him to a public house in North Street, owned by a man named Madole at that time. After 2 drinks of rum had been partaken of the weaver and that attorney, the latter broached the subject of his mission. His desire, he informed the weaver, was to procure such private information as would lead to the arrest on charges of high treason of certain people in Belfast, a list of whose names he placed on the end table, and for such information regarding the persons he was prepared to give Hope at that moment of a very handsome reward, counting over ostentatiously while he spoke 10 notes of a value of £50 each, £500 in all, about 100,000 in today's money, at least. Sipping his rum, Jimmy Hope listened quietly to the informer. Sorry, Cathal Byrne is not a honest broker in this, so that's why he comes down hard on McCracken. And after McCracken had stated the reason for arranging the meeting in the Old North Street Inn, had made a statement with regard to the award he was prepared to pay for information given, the linen weaver from Brown Square told him that he would need a wee bit of time to consider a proposal and would meet the man of the law in the same place the following evening to settle the business. Leaving the old inn, Hope, while Hope went leisurely up North Street in the direction of his house in Brown Square, he kept looking back, and once the informer McCracken was out of sight, Hope doubled back round Smithfield to Hercules Street to acquaint his friend William Tennant, a United man. He lived in the old street of the Butchers, with what he had just heard. He then hurried on to Crown Entry, the office of the Northern Star. There he told his story to William Sampson, the editor, and from that he went to the thatch house on shop Samuel Nielsen at the corner of Sugar House Entry and Waring Street, where he told Nielsen of McCracken's offer, warned him of his danger. Seems to have froze. So this is actually the route. Okay, so this is a modern version of an old map, and so here you can see Wayne Tavern Street. This is North Street. I reckon this is where the tavern was. I'm placing it there because that's where the Elephant Bar used to be, and I have fond memories of Elephant Bar. Laws Lane still exists, so he came up here. He was supposed to go up Peters Hill, down Brown Square to where I believe his weaver's cottage was located here, just here. But instead of that, he went down Millfield, down Francis Street, through Millfield, down and in the end to warn off the United Irishmen. Now, he himself had to get out of town, and he shortly afterwards left and moved down to Dublin for a while. So as arranged then, Hope met McCracken the next evening in Dole's Inn, where he, after partaking of some refreshments, so he wasn't that stupid, had much talk together. But when their talk was finished, as Hope rose to go, to the great surprise of the traitor attorney, he declined to act the part of informer against his fellow townsmen. What I want you to note here, by the way, just before we leave this slide, is the school, just here at the bottom of at the top of Brown Street, the green fields around it, and also the appearance of a Presbyterian meeting house, but more on that next week. So, the Brown Square brothers. So, Friar Michael Phillips. Friar Phillips was one of the several Catholic clergy who undertook the role of government spy. His instructions were to infiltrate the defenders, which he did successfully, and he soon recognised McCracken's key role in uniting Irish defenders and United Irishmen. January 1796, his body was found submerged near the paperworks in Cromick Dock, weighed down with a heavy stone inserted in the pocket of his greatcoat. That's actually wrong. This comes from a assassination piece in the Belfast Telegraph on Henry Joey. He was weighed down by 2 stone of lead clock weights, 1 in each pocket. Now, this particular guy, John Brown, then called an inquest. He didn't like the first inquest recorded a verdict of suicide. Now, a Catholic priest, friar, committing suicide is not exactly the most liable thing to happen. So Brown tried again because he realized that there were assassination squads operating against these government informers. So he tried a second inquest, and again, the second inquest, at a jury of the peers, he found that the friar had committed suicide. So another famous informer, William Byrd, alias John Smith, the government informer. So rumours of his spine proved impossible to shake off, and he departed the scene petrified that he was going to be murdered by the Brown Square boys. That's in the Belfast Jacobin by Ken Dawson. So there's direct evidence, and my own research is there's about 7 was shot dead or stabbed at Peters Hill, all who would have been possible informers. So what happened to the rebellion? Well, we all know it failed. This is, again, John Kerry trying to look back in time. I don't think, and there's no evidence, a scaffold was built it was more than likely that a ladder was put up, and he was Henry Joy here mounting the scaffold was hung from either the town clock or a mini boom that came out. So what happened at Brown Square? So this is the Brown Square. You can see the green fields, and this is from the 1830s. And you can see how quickly then by the 1860s, this is again a bird's eye view of Brown Square. So you can see Melbourne Street, Brown Street, you can see Brown Square, the actual street coming down. And you can also see how quickly the place developed. And this is also where the sectarianism in Belfast began, because what you have here, just bottom left, is the Catholic district of Belfast. Even today, you still have that split, because this area here was known as the Pound, which is where animals were impounded, coming into Belfast port. And it was the cheapest and worst land in Belfast. So therefore, Catholics then began to move there. And I'm going to cover the sectarianism in Belfast in another lecture. So just to finish up, I'm going to go back to this because I want to re-emphasize the change, the sea change at Brown Square. And if you really want to go into how that came about, I hope you all see this, Forgetful Remembrance by Guy Bernier. Okay. That's a book I would recommend if you want to get into mechanics, but I am going to cover it as part of these lectures. Now, I've sort of run out of time, but I'm going to give people 15 minutes for questions. And next week, we're going to cover education, segregated education at Brown Square, and how Brown Square then became at the forefront of sectarianism. So at that, I think what I have to do now is find a way to let everybody in. Can you all unmute yourselves, please? Hang on, I can. Okay, so everyone enjoy it first of all.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there, first of all, if there's any questions, and if there is, what I would like you to do is just tell me who you are, what your question, and then a wee bit about yourself, a quick snapshot, and then the question. So as we all start to get to know each other now as well. So please go ahead. Whoever's first, whoever wants to go first.
Hi, Frank. I'm Steve Malone. I'm a tour guide, and I'm very interested to learn more about the United Irishmen because it's part of my tour. But my first question has to be about the Shankill Gold Rush, as I mentioned on the email. Can you tell me for a definite what year that was in? Because I read 3 different accounts, and I don't know for sure.
I'll come back to you.
Judging from the clothes and the photographs,
It was about,
it's earlier than 1969. But what age were you? If you're the same age as me, so what age were you?
it's about 1968. I would bet money was 68. Yeah, I'm 60.
Oh, okay.
And as I say, I know because I got there too late, but I still remember my neighbour actually buying sovereigns for 2 shillings a time.
Disgraceful.
Yeah. Oh, it's a cracker.
How did you do that to children?
Well, sign of the times, you know.
Just to keep her, take it over.
And any more questions?
Sorry, hi, I'm Sheila, for those who know me or don't know me. No, it's very interesting about, and John sort of was backing up what I had sort of said about the Sugar House Lane, Wine Cellar Entry and Sugar House Lane kind of came perpendicular to each other. And that's kind of where White's Tavern and the Monaco Bar are now. You'll find a lot of pubs will claim to be the oldest pub in Belfast. There's actually something over the Heart Bar at the moment. But in actual fact, there are it was never proven, you're right. It was never proven about the United Irishmen meeting there. That was a cellar. White's Tavern was a tavern. It housed the barrels of wine that came off the ships that were taken off the strips on the high street and rolled up Wine Cellar Entry. Henry's Down, Joy's Entry, they did that. It was again was a tavern that was one of the oldest taverns. Sorry, White's was the tavern, and Henry's was an inn. And so the way they call different names of like a tavern, an inn, a cellar, a pub, that's why there's so many pubs being able to tell to say or to try to claim that they are the oldest one in Belfast. It's very interesting if you can get a chance to get down to Prony and look at some of the records. It's not open, unfortunately, at the moment, but some of the records that are in Prony are great, and you can then verify some of your findings that way as a tour guide.
Well, as I say, the thing for me was that everyone that you talk to is, where was United Irishmen in Belfast? Kelly Sellers. I really did try. I mean, I tried my best to get a source. Now, don't get me wrong, I drink in Kelly Sellers. You know, it's a great pub. And I don't know if John Gray would have access to whoever it was put that blue circle plaque up there, but I can find no evidence whatsoever that United Irishmen met there, and certainly no evidence that Henry Joy McCracken hid behind barrels. But I did find the evidence, and I do maintain, and I think I've come on firm ground here, that Brown Square was the heartland, was the meeting place and the planning place for the United Irish. And certainly the research I have on his tavern with Stephen McCracken was that's where the Sims brothers and Robert Sims was began to be talked out of leading the Army of the North, which eventually then Henry Joy McCracken took on. And remember, McCracken was in that particular lodge, and Sims then resigned his commission as a leader. There was a whole confuster up at Antrim with the Antrim colonels and disagreeing about waiting for the French or going ahead. And eventually Henry Joy took it on, and the rest, as I say, is history. But my best guess is if there's, apart from the city centre, so around those back entries, you know, where, as you say, Sheila, back entries where you have Whites and places like that, and the Donegal Arms, which is where the shoe shop is now, just there facing Dunn Stores. So apart from there, you know, that's the centre of Belfast. But if you want to have secret meetings and you're Presbyterian, then I think Brown Square was the place you were going to go. And I think the fact that James Hope came back here to live and died here is evidence too that Hope felt safe here, which is really unusual. Now, in saying that, he died a poor man, a man of no property. And we can't go to his grave because there's only his grave and Francis Joseph Biggers up at Mollusk. But next week I'll actually take you, I'll do the Zoom thing, the Google Earth thing, and actually take you virtually to the grave. So he's a forgotten hero, Jemmy Hope. He's one of those people that we're still finding out about. And to be honest with you, almost all that we know of the Irish Rebellion, the 1788 Rebellion, is through Jimmy Hope's eyes, because it was him that transcribed the story of the rebellion to Dr. Madden. And he did that secretly, either at Brown Square or at Miriam McCracken's house, wherever he felt safe. And he was an old man by then. So I hope I know that's sort of an elongated answer. So is there anybody else, any more questions?
There's Frank, James Elson here. I work for DC Tours. It's more an observation than anything else. And the reason that I'm here in this course is that I watched your lecture or your presentation, I think it was for the Lennon Hall Library a few weeks ago.
Yeah. And
the reason that I was pointed in that direction was by the great granddaughter of Jemmy Hope, who said to me, "Oh, you're interested in Irish history? This is my, whatever it was, relation. You might be interested in seeing this guy talking." And I'll be honest with you, I mean, whilst I know where Brown Square is, and I know it would be a bit feisty, shall we say, and I like the 12th of July and that sort of stuff, I really didn't know too much about it. So I'll say it's just pure coincidence that here I am doing this course now, and It was just literally just a messenger message on Facebook. You might enjoy this. So thank you very much. Very enjoyable anyway.
It's going to it gets better. It grows legs. You know, the thing I love about Brown Square is, and I'll say it in my book and I'll say it here, is I'm just the latest lucky person. I was born here and I've come back to live here. And I am really the lucky person because there'll be another generation after me, but that generation will have my book. So they'll have a reference guide to what was here before, because before Brown Square was the heartland land of Orangism, as you say, James. It was the place. And as you'll see next week, how that actually came about. But the fascinating bit for me was that Brown Square is the most loyal. And I suppose in today's climate of the protocol and the Irish Sea border, Brown Square is both the most loyal and the most disloyal place in Belfast. You know, that's that contradiction, and that contradiction is going to run all the way through this course. And I do hope, and this is why I want the tour guides to do the course, that the next time you're on it, you're taking a tour past here, especially when it comes to the peace lines, that you'll, instead of driving past on the way to the peace line up on Cooper Street, that you'll realise that the very first peace line started here in Belfast, and the very first sectarianism and riots started down here. And that was around about 1815. So any more questions?
Just an observation, Frank. It's Johnny McClory here. I'm tour guide. You're bringing back happy and sometimes unhappy memories to me about Brown Square, because I was born and bred in John Street,
Yes.
which is just down a stone's throw, literally, from Brown Square. And it used to be when you were recruiting girls, and the shortest way home, if you left a girl home from Shankill, was come down, cut across Millfield, past Brown Square. And for 4 weeks in a year, you didn't do that. You went a long way around just in case, because the boys out of Brown Square would have been waiting on you, because you knew you were going that way there. You were maybe might have got a kicking. But from in and around, obviously been born and bred there, Barrack Street, Institution Place, the new Millfield Tech. My father worked in the glass factory that was there. He was a maintenance engineer in the Thermalux glass factory and that. So you bring back really, really happy memories, as well as educating me in relation to Brown Square and the United Irishmen.
You didn't realise that the heart of republicanism is in Brown Square, did you?
No, I did not. I'm going to have a best mate who lived there on up to 1965, and me and him went to school together in St. Mary's at Barrack Street there. So I'm going to ring him here after this and educate him.
Well, I know when it comes to Hamill Street and John Street, it's not in my book, but my mother, so you would have got bathrooms put in?
Yes,
so
we got,
about 1970, 71?
That's right, yep.
Okay, well, the reason they were put in, we had no bath, we had no indoor
toilet,
outside toilet, no hot water. They had to have a geyser.
Yep.
So, and in the middle of the Troubles, in the middle of 69 and all that, the women of Brown Square, the women of Boundary Street, who was my mother, and the girl who paid those kids the 2 shillings for every sovereign, got together with the women of Hamill Street and John Street and Boyd Street here in Brown Square, and used my uncle Johnny. He was known as Johnny McQuaid,
right?
The MP.
MP,
so they used him at Belfast City Council, and it was them who fought to get us indoor baths. So there's all sorts of links here, you know, and this is the beauty of this, you know.
Yeah.
Any more questions? You need to unmute yourself, John. Just unmute yourself, John. Hang on, see if I can do it for you. John, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, right.
Right, that's
Is
it.
that better?
Yes, go ahead.
John Robin, tour guide in the Glens of Fantrim here. I just happened to see the name James MacDonald in the list of United Irishmen. Would that be the Brutus of Belfast, who is buried at Lade Graveyard outside Cushendall?
I'll get back to you on it. You see, this is still an active. I know what you're saying here, and I know that there's other guides on here. We did our walking tours as part of the tour guide practice, And I'd mentioned the Brutus of Belfast, because I know, John, that I was really shocked when I got to Lade Churchyard and seen how history has treated James MacDonald, Dr.
Mhm.
MacDonald,
Yeah.
you know, and the fact that he betrayed the United Irishmen. Well, he put up a reward for Thomas Russell, I think, and yet he's now revered, and there's a big, massive cross there. You know, historical revisionism, as I hope I'm proving as part of this course, is ongoing. And certainly, you know, when it came, as I say, I would highly recommend this book, okay, by Guy Bernier, because, you know, when it came to the anniversary of United Irish, you remember the Catholic Church was against the United Irishmen. In fact, it was judged as a mortal sin. And yet by 1898, whenever the anniversary came along, it was the Catholic Church who paid for the promotion of it. So they wrote that their own history into it. So it's still a subject, you know, that still causes controversy. And a best example of that, if you look at the front of my book, there's the bond that's passing the bottom of Brown Street where Jerry McCrory used to avoid for 4 weeks. Okay. I'm nearly certain it's the Henry Joy McCracken Memorial Bond or it's the James Hope Bond from Carrickhill. You know, so as I say, historical revisionism is very much a part of this course. And as the course develops, and we get up in especially the troubles, because I'm not going to duck the troubles, you know, because Jerry, you might have been unlucky and picked up by Shankill Butchers.
Yep.
Yep. So we're going to get into the tough bit as well, because it all links back in here. Okay. But I'll leave that for another lecture. So any other questions? All good?
Yep. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Next week, same time, same place. I will send you out. You should be able to access a YouTube channel with these videos on. So you'll be able to download them and watch them. And I hope I hope Sheila can talk Mira into doing that. Okay. Otherwise, I'd see you next week, folks. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Frank.
Very, very good.
See you next week.
Thanks. See you next week. Thanks.
All the best.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye. Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.